it's Anna from the Glen Cove Library. Glad to see you today, and we miss you all and hope that we can get back to the library pretty soon. In the meantime, there are so many things you can do. Just take a look at our website, glencovelibrary.org. You can get a digital library card if you don't have one. You can download books. And there are so many things coming up for our summer reading program, which will be online until we can open up again. In the meantime, we're doing Storytime from home, and the book I'd like to read to you today is called Calvin Can't Fly. It's the story of a bookworm, Birdie. Now, do you think birds can really read? No, I don't think so either. But this is a story. And let's see, but Calvin, that's this bird, who's sitting reading a book, and here's all his birdie cousins. They're all flying up in the air, and he's sitting, relaxing, and reading. And here's all Calvin's cousins on a wire, where birds like to sit. Here he is reading. Calvin is a starling. He was born under the eaves of an old barn with his 3 brothers, 4 sisters, and 67,432 cousins. Starlings have big families. Right from the beginning, Calvin was different. Right from the day all the little starlings tumbled out of their nests to discover the world. Charlie, what did he discover? Worms. Adeline discovered grass. Clement, he discovered dirt. And Audrey discovered water. And Calvin discovered a book. While all of Calvin's cousins chased beetles, bugs, and ants, Calvin was learning to read letters, words, and sentences. At night, his cousins dreamed of insect eating and garbage picking. Calvin dreamed of adventure stories, legends, and poetry. He even dreamed that someday he'd be a great writer himself. On June 1st, it's coming up pretty soon, while all the little starlings lined up for flying lessons with their teacher, Mr. Wingstead, Calvin was nowhere to be seen. Where is that bird? That's Mr. Wingstead over here. And where is Calvin? Actually, Calvin was in the library. As the other little starlings were learning to swoop and hover and fly figure eights, Calvin buried his beak in a book, and there his mind soared. Calvin read about pirates and cavemen, volcanoes and rainbows, whales and dinosaurs. Calvin especially loved dinosaurs. He learned how the planets circle the sun, what makes the wind blow, and amazing facts like how caterpillars grow up to become, butterflies. His books took him to places wings never could, and his heart fluttered with excitement. Calvin's cousins called him Nerdy Birdie, Geeky Beaky, and Bookworm. And when you're a bird, being called a bookworm or a worm is a very bad thing. Calvin ruffled his feathers and mumbled, "Oh, how the wounding words of scorn do sting." Then he sadly waddled back to the library, the only place that he was truly happy. And so he spent the summer reading, learning, and absorbing everything his little starling mind could. Until the first leaf turned orange. What season's coming then? When everything starts to turn orange and green and everything's so pretty in the fall, that's right. And the leaves turned orange and fell to the ground. The fall wind sent a chill through the old barn. Summer's nests blew to the floorboards. It was time to head south. His cousins warned, "Calvin, you'd better learn how to fly. In a couple of days, we've got to be going and out of here." Calvin said, "Ah, yes, migration. I've read about that." His sister asked, "Calvin, can you fly?" Calvin had to admit he couldn't. He has all the other birdies getting ready. All the other starlings took off in a giant formation, but Calvin could only stand and watch, and a big lonely tear rolled down his cheek. And here's Calvin here. Calvin turned and trudged back toward the old barn. He was so upset he didn't notice his brothers and sisters and cousins coming back to get him. All of a sudden, they were tying up Calvin's middle with string and scraps of cloth they had found in the garbage. And look how they're carrying him. They grasped the other ends with their beaks, and off they flew, with Calvin, somewhat embarrassed, safely in tow. And here he is. For days and days they flew. Calvin recognized the rivers, mountains, and towns he had read about all summer. Excitedly, he pointed them out to his brothers, sisters, and cousins, but the other little starlings just flapped their wings and headed south. And look at this cow. You ever see a cow looking like this? Soon there came a day when the winds blew especially hard. Trees bent sideways, leaves scattered wildly, flying became harder and harder. The air had an odd smell to it, the smell of danger. Calvin, remembering back to his favorite weather book, warned the rest of his family. A hurricane is coming. All his brothers and sisters and cousins asked, "What is a hurricane?" Those are all the birds. Calvin explained as quickly as his little beak could, "We need to get out of the path of a violent tropical weather system which is storming up the coast at tremendous speed and will not diminish until it encounters large stretches of landmass. Everybody, make haste into that cave." They had no idea what Calvin was talking about, but they had to admit it did sound real, so the flock made a loop-de-doop left, a dipsy-doodle right, and dove into the cave. They did everything Calvin told them to. To their amazement, a great storm did blow across the land. It thundered over mountains, it roared through the villages, it smashed and crashed, rumbled and raged, just as Calvin had predicted. The whole big starling family gathered together, watching in fear and awe. The storm finally ended. The sun came out of the sky and the starlings came out of their cave. They were safe and sound, all because of who? Calvin, that's right. And here they are. They celebrated with a great starling party in honor of Calvin. They ate big juicy worms and yummy crunchy beetles. They danced and sang songs about how Calvin had saved their lives. They toasted Calvin with acorn caps filled with fresh, clear mountain water. Calvin was so happy and felt so good deep down inside that he jumped and hopped and danced and flapped his wings and flapped his wings and flapped his wings. All the other starlings looked at him in amazement. "Calvin, you can fly," they exclaimed. And Calvin, the happiest starling in the whole wide world, chirped, "Why, yes, I believe I can." And they all flew south with big wide smiles on their little starling faces, especially Calvin. So pretty soon you'll see some starlings coming around, and then in the fall they gather in great big groups of birds and they all start to fly south. So look out for them, and we'll see you soon again. Have fun.